We had it both ways
Okay.
in the two examples that I found, sorry.
Point of order, the chair of the finance committee is running late, and in order to keep the meeting on time, has requested that a chair pro tem be appointed to facilitate today's meeting until his arrival. Policy 2:110 assigns to the board president the duty to make all board committee appointments. Per member Waters' request, I will serve as finance chair, committee chair pro tem for today's meeting until his arrival. I call to order the September 18, 2024 Special Finance Committee meeting of the Board of Education of Hinsdale Township High School District 86. The meeting is being held in the District Administration Center Conference Room. The time is 4:34 p.m. Lauren, will you please call roll?
Member Waters? Member Greenspan?
Here.
Member Rahman?
Here.
Please stand if you are able and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do not have anybody signed up for audience communication, so we will move on to action items. Is there a motion to approve the August 14, 2024 Finance Committee meeting minutes?
Motion, Ramon.
Second, Greenspan. Please call roll.
Member Greenspan?
Aye.
Member Rahman?
Aye.
Member Waters?
Moving on to discussion items. The committee will discuss the following items. 3.1, review 2024 tax levy. 3.2, review 2024 forecast assumptions. 3.3, fund transfer discussion. 3.4, procurement update. CFO Stevenson?
Thank you. All right. First item we have is the updated tax levy kind of basics presentation. The last couple of years, we've kind of used this as the kickoff to the levy process. This is in part kind of background information for just kind of the mechanics of how the levy works. And then kind of gets into some of the terms, and then kind of just walks through a little bit through the process, and then the projection for what the forecasted levy will look like. So we can just kind of walk through the presentation. After review, any feedback that the Finance Committee has, we'll incorporate it in, and then this will be presented to the whole board at the September RAM. So the levy process, the timeline, we start in September. So it's the review of the forecast assumptions. We're
Show this
the 5-year forecast is so basically the forecast assumptions are approved by the board in September. We'll take those and as the budget's approved out in September as well, we take the budget and then those forecast assumptions and we use that to build up the 5-year financial projections, and we'll bring those back to the Finance Committee and then the board in October. In November, typically in our normal operation calendar, we would approve the estimated levy resolution. This year, because there's not the 20 days between that November and December meeting, that estimated levy resolution will come to the October RAM meeting for approval. And then in December, the final levy is adopted by the board, and we submit that to DuPage and Cook County. The January of next year is when we'll know what the final PTEL is. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases the CPI report from the prior month, generally somewhere between like the 10th and 15th of the following month. And so then we'll know the December CPI number, which will give us the 2024 PTEL number, which will be used in the 25 levy. In March, then the draft extension. This is really for DuPage County. The Cook County timing is not, it's a little more erratic and kind of varies year to year. DuPage the Cook was very on schedule this year, so that's been very good this year. DuPage will send out the draft extensions, we'll make any final reviews, adjustments, etc. Submit those back, and then the final tax extension information is published generally in April for DuPage County. The next couple slides kind of walk through some of the key terms related to the levy. Everything on here is really unchanged from the prior year presentation, so kind of walks through just the definitions of what a tax levy is, an extension, the different valuations, the market assessed, equalized assessed, and just kind of define some of those terms. I think some of the language in the levy process is what, it's just not common language that not everybody uses, so I think just having this as a reference can be helpful. You know, for the board and for the community to kind of understand when we're throwing out these terms, equalized assessed value, what does that mean? So just having this kind of information here as a resource so that individuals can kind of understand what those terms mean. The next slide, the truth in taxation. We developed this over the last 2 years of incorporating this into the presentation because of the unusual CPI environment that we were in. We had 2 consecutive levies that exceeded the 5%, and we were required to do the truth in taxation hearing. This year, based on what we're estimating, there won't be a required truth in taxation hearing. I left the slide in, but my intention was that if we're not really talking about it, we can either leave it in or just take this out. There's really probably it's either there as an informational item but I'm not anticipating doing any type of truth in taxation hearing because we're going to be probably like 4.1% increase year over year, so we're not even close to hitting the 5%. The next slide kind of walks through the tax rate and EAV, you know, to just trying to convey, you know, the tax rate is, you know, kind of the item that most taxpayers are familiar with looking at, like their tax bills, but it's not really something that, it's really the last step in the process is we're submitting the levy information, the tax extension is getting finalized, and it's really that tax extension divided by the equalized assessed value is what determines that tax rate figure. Moving down, we have the tax extension. So this is in total the combination of the DuPage and Cook County. Off to the right, it shows the different EAV from DuPage and from Cook, and then the different tax rates. So that on the left, things are kind of commingled there, and then on the right, kind of breaks out. A DuPage resident would see that 1.7 tax rate, while a Cook County resident would see the 1.992.
And that's the tax rate specifically to Hinsdale to 86.
Correct. Yes, not the overall tax rate they see in the bill, but just specific to what we're extending. Or is it getting extended on our behalf, I guess, technically. The counties are actually doing the extension, we're making the request through the levy.
May you pause for a second, because
Yes.
we have the financials with regards to the 23 levy in front of us. Can you please explain the importance of a levy to the overall financial health of a school district?
Yeah, I think going back to you know, what we kind of talked about during the budget presentation, how the funding for the district is predominantly local sources, which is predominantly property taxes. So when we see you know, our revenue increases are really driven by the increases to the property taxes. So it's that CPI, that new construction amount that is increasing the property taxes, is really on the revenue side is the main driver, giving us the ability to try to keep pace with expenditure increases. Yeah. So, you know, we've seen, you know, federal funding, which is fairly nominal for the district, but that's basically been flat, decreasing if you count, you know, ESSER going away, and then on the state side, you know, is really on the evidence-based funding side, almost static and not moving, and and on the reimbursement side is lagging behind, you know, our expenditures. So really that property tax component is really the only item that is allowing us to try to keep pace with the expenditure increases.
Yeah, so in general, like for a household, we could say cost of living increases, but for the district, it's expenditure increases. You know, utilities go up, products go up, you know. Salaries increase year over year for cost of living. But CPI was, it was an anomaly for a couple of years, but we're not there again, probably won't be for a while. Chair Waters is here, hello.
Hey, how are you?
But Chair Waters has made this point over and over again, it was an anomaly, we won't get there again. How much of our district revenue comes from local property tax?
So you have about $112 million technically.
Mm-hmm.
Our budget top line was like 142.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in there you even have like some fund transfers and some other things that you could back out. So it's a really, you know, you're talking a really high percentage of funding is coming from that property tax number.
Like 90 plus, or,
Well, it depends on what number you're talking about.
Yeah.
The 142, part
Yeah,
of
I
that's
guess
probably.
112.
I just wanna understand how much of
You're
our,
talking 80%, but I think you could back some stuff out and say it's probably closer to the 85 to 90 range when you're really talking the operational funding for the district.
so between 85 and 90% is local property tax. Okay, that's good to know.
And we're
That's
constricted.
local that's all local sources, so we have other
Yeah,
local sources included,
Yeah.
but yeah.
so we have sales tax and,
We have interest, replacement tax, other things that, you know,
Mhm.
facility rentals, things like, there's other, local revenue sources, but, yeah, overall, at the end of the day, it's most of those are all kind of not really moving, you know, that much, or they're not changing that significantly year to year. It's the property tax and the property tax changes are the only thing that allows us to kind of keep pace with any of the expenditure increases.
yeah, the levy. Mhm. And then if there is a problem with the levy, or let's just say if the levy is not max, that percentage decrease is compounded year over year,
Correct.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so any reduction to the capped funds would be compounding forever.
Yeah, in
So,
perpetuity.
yeah, so any adjustments there. It's only the debt service where you can make adjustments and not have it affect future years.
And then you wrote an AP that
Mhm.
supports if there is a surplus
Mhm.
at a certain percentage,
Correct.
you would bring it back to finance committee to discuss abatement and such. Yep.
Yeah, I think that exists in the 420, you know, policy, and then admin procedures where we kind of define some of those levers where,
Mhm.
you know, we're targeting our fund balances to be and where we would make, or would we review potential options for adjustments if we reach certain thresholds.
Right,
And the other thing, Joshua, I think we're limited by CPI from last year, I think it's what, 3.4.
Mhm.
So that's our max ask. But by the same token, where it becomes beneficial to the district or detrimental is the retirement schedule, how many people are coming in, coming out, retiring versus not, that should generate some relief. And I think that does in the next couple of years, right?
The next 2 years, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to that, I guess, in the
Yeah.
forecast
Yeah.
assumptions. We have that number, the numbers there identified.
I just think the levy is always important, Josh, don't get me wrong, and the discussion, but, we're having these TIF discussions. And an understanding of how the district, recoups some of the money or all of the money is via levy, and we need the levy anyhow, year over year,
Mhm.
to maintain, the financial health of the district and to support normal growth and expenditures. Yeah, okay.
And just to be clear on that, Josh, right, like, if they pass this particular TIF, the school districts will generate the same levy plus 3.4%, if you will. They just might have to hit alternative taxpayers versus not, right?
Potential, yeah, there's potential for redistribution of taxes, there's, there's new construction development, there's, we don't have access to that new property growth, inside of a TIF boundary.
Yeah.
So there's multiple
So,
impacts.
just so I understand, Josh, with the levy, if this TIF, if how the district is impacted by a TIF and diverted tax dollars, is that the district, if a TIF is enacted in our district, it doesn't increase our levy authority. It's still max 5% or P-TEL,
Correct.
Whichever's less.
whichever's less. Just wait. So the issue is this, is that if the tax funds are diverted to, say, a TIF fund, while the district could make up the money that was diverted, there's still a year-over-year potential loss.
So I guess there's a couple components to the TIF is where you have, the TIF reduces the EAV overall. So, and when we looked at the tax rate calculation, you have the levy or the tax extension divided by the EAV. If that EAV number shrinks, the tax rate number increases. So while our tax extension will not change, the tax rate that the individuals pay would be going up. So you have to, if part of the tax revenue gets diverted, everybody has to pay a little bit more to offset that the money that's getting diverted. So they're basically subsidizing that amount that is getting redirected into the TIF. Plus, new construction is outside of the P-TEL or the CPI cap that we have. So, but that new construction inside a TIF is not accessible until the TIF expires
In 23 years.
in 23 years.
Plus possible 12.
Yep.
So you have the two components of a redistribution of taxes and an ability to access new property growth within that TIF boundary, which is actually, if we frame it as a reduction in revenue or preventing some additional revenue that would typically be able to be captured by the district is not able to be captured.
Annually, yeah.
So, this is where I was confused, so that sounds like what you're saying is, over time, new construction you don't get access to, but when it becomes a mature property after a year or two where it's no longer considered new, our EAV can't access that increased growth, which thereby constricts that denominator, right?
Yeah, so basically what the townships do on an annual basis is they record all new property growth, and we get credit for that. So they put out, Downers Grove Township, Lyons Township will track all new property growth, and it'll be, for us it's generally maybe $40 million in new construction. But if $5 million in new construction happens within that TIF, we don't have access. We don't get credit for that as new construction until the TIF expires. But any of the new construction that occurs generally within the district, that allows us to go beyond the CPI number and capture that new property growth.
So you get the growth, but not the construction post.
Not the construction, any construction within a TIF boundary, no, until the TIF expires.
Until it expires.
Yep.
But that's where I'm still confused, and it's certainly not your fault, it's more a matter of my lack of understanding. So, right, taxpayers could be impacted, right? But in addition to that, does it diminish the max ask by the district had that not occurred? And what I'm saying is, like, the base is 100, and the base otherwise would have been 106, and now it's only 100. Our calculus is now impacted, which of course means taxpayers gotta pick up the slack that was diverted. But I'm saying is the base that gets derived against diminished because of it, that otherwise wouldn't have been diminished, and also hurts our total budget ask.
So
If you
our,
would, not ask.
what we levy doesn't change.
Right.
And what our tax cap, what the property tax extension limit is, doesn't change. So maybe if we
Yeah.
keep going, it might help
Yeah, yeah.
looking at the slide.
Sorry, John.
No, that's fine, but I think we can get to it, I think, in with
Yeah,
a little.
No worries.
So, levy timeline, so just real quick, so the 23 PTEL, that's determined by the change in CPIU, which is generally the headline CPI that, you know, if you're watching any news programs, that generally they reference. But instead of CPIU uses an average across all 12 months, PTEL uses a change from December to December. Why, I don't know, it's kind of random, but it is what it is. So the change in that is, it was 3.4%, so that is the 23 PTEL, which is what we're using for the 24 levy. The December, the levy is adopted by the board. We'll start receiving property taxes, generally from Cook County, as early as January, February. DuPage County's more May, June. We won't recognize any of those property taxes. We obviously receive the cash, it goes into the bank accounts. We don't recognize them as revenue until July 1st. Just as part of our deferral of early property taxes and operating on an accrual basis. That revenue is really to fund fiscal year 26 for us, so we won't recognize any of that revenue until the start of fiscal year 26. Levy assumptions, obviously we talked about the PTEL number. New construction, we'll use 50 million for the estimate. We'll get an update. Generally doesn't come till probably about the first week in November. Downers Grove will publish an estimated new construction number, so we'll validate against that before we finalize, you know, the levy that's brought to the board for adoption in December. But really, you know, that's probably slightly higher than what, that number is gonna be slightly higher than what we actually have in our forecast. The last few years, we've been more in the, kind of like that 40 to 45 million range. So, we'll be forecasting probably a slightly more conservative number, and we just use a little bit higher number so that we don't end up in a position where we under levy, you know, what actually the max amount could have been. EAV increase is really not impactful on the levy, but we're just putting in, you know, an estimated amount for that. And then forecast assumptions are on the 26th. So I think this is, maybe we can kind of circle back to the questions as we kind of look at the formula. So basically, from this, we have the prior year extension, we multiply that by PTEL. So we had the $100 million, so we're only looking at the capped portion. The uncapped portion is not relevant because you don't levy that amount. You receive what you need to make your principal and interest payments. And that's determined by you file your bonds with the county, and they know exactly what's on your debt service schedule, and they extend that on your behalf. The capped portion is what's limited by PTEL. So you have that $100 million was the capped portion of the 23 extension. That's multiplied by the 3.4% PTEL. Then that's divided by your total EAV and your EAV minus your new construction. So that is what increases the limiting rate by that reduction in the denominator of the new construction. That increases the limiting rate to allow you to go beyond that 3.4%. So for us, I think the total capped extension amount is like 104.4 that we have on here. I think it's like 4.1%, I'll double check that, year over year. If you're looking at what the capped extension is to the estimated capped extension, it's about a 4.1% increase. So you're saying 3.4% in CPI growth, about 0.7% growth in new property. So when you're talking about what does the TIF impact, the TIF is impacting the denominator of the equation and not the numerator. So it's saying this EAV number would be reduced down, and your new construction, so you may be losing on both these numbers, which loss on the first number only redistributes money, so it creates a higher tax rate
For our taxpayers.
for the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So instead of 1.55, maybe it's 1.57, and you extend that out to everybody, and everybody pays a little bit more to subsidize whatever goes into the TIF.
Yeah, to the extent the denominator falls, the tax rate goes
So,
up.
yes. And then if you're losing on the new construction side, you're actually losing on actual revenue that could have been generated into the district. There's both impacts potentially in a TIF, depending on the particular TIF, what's happening in there, and, you know.
Well, this particular TIF that we're speaking of is predominantly residential. That's why it is germane to this levy discussion.
Right.
That's why it's concerning to me. Yeah, there's not really sales tax receipts that are coming in with this TIF, a lot of it. I think we roughly get $40,000 a year from Jewel or something like that.
I would have to look
Yeah,
particular,
okay.
specific.
Okay.
So I'm just running math for kicks. The only way that the limiting rate would go down in this example where we know that new construction will make the tax rate go higher, cause more away from that bigger number, certainly will drive the rate higher. But the only way it would work on opposite is if the EAV markedly outperformed wildly, which we would then
Right.
capture anyway from the taxpayer.
Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, it gets, it's one thing to talk about the discussion, you know, at the 30,000 foot level, like,
Right.
this is what's happening with the district, but then when you get down to the individual, you know, parcel or home, things could be significantly different, like your tax bill could move because the market value of your house moved, so it's really,
Right.
there's a number of moving components, so we talk about, okay, it might go up 4.1%, if someone looks at their tax bill and says, well, why did mine go up 7 and someone else it only went up 2? It's because the valuations fluctuated year to year, or you were reassessed, or, you know, so the impacts at the individual level may be different than, you know, what we're saying, this is what's happening kind of overall, or the impact the district is having on the tax process.
Gotcha, thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, dropping down forecasted levy. So as we talked about, the 1.55 would be the estimated limiting rate, or that would become the new tax rate for the capped funds. Just so everyone's clear, that's kind of a blended rate because we're looking at Cook and DuPage. So DuPage would be probably slightly lower than that, Cook would be higher than that, but it's kind of just blended out over the full levy. We'd be looking at just over 1.44 million in the capped funds. Debt service is pretty similar, as that's kind of fairly level over the next few years. It's just over the 12 million mark.
Josh, can you explain again where the 0.1807 rate comes for the bond funds?
Yeah, so
How
that's
is that-
based,
That's not part of the limiting rate.
it's not part of the limiting
So how
rate,
is
but
that
it'll be part of the tax rate. So basically, they'll determine the limiting rate to determine how much you can extend in your capped funds. And then they're gonna take, we know you have 5 bond series, you owe X amount in these principal and interest payments over this next year. So the total dollar amount for us is the 12.168 million. And the county will take that and just you divide that by the EAV, and you would come up with the tax rate for the bond and interest fund.
Because the bond and interest numbers have already been set due to the agreement there.
Right.
That's all
Yep.
that, the schedule. It's all-
Yep.
Yep.
Last slide on here, this is kind of the abatement discussions that we've had over the last couple of years. This is really unchanged from prior years, so there's really no new information in here. We've kind of talked about before, you know, the effects of abatement on cap funds is significant as it kind of has that compounding effect in perpetuity. You know, you can do abatements on the debt service fund. There becomes some complications when you look at some of the bond series and where we only own the 2015B bond series,
Yeah.
which is a fairly nominal annual amount compared to the others, and then the bigger ones are the referendum bond series, and the 2016 series, where those are owned by, I don't know, thousands of individuals,
Yeah.
most likely, or institutions, or whoever. We can't just unilaterally abate those funds. So there would be some other steps of either pre-funding the debt service fund. To be able to do that would be the most likely form if that was ever to be considered. So there would have to be kind of like a multi-year process to put in place for that type of consideration. But basically, yeah, that's the levy presentation. Any questions, thoughts, additions before we run this back for the full board on Thursday?
Maybe just keep the truth and taxation slide just for education,
Okay.
just for, you know.
I was thinking about maybe just moving it towards the
Just
end with the
towards the-
abatement, where it's just more, this is just kind of
Informational.
informational,
Yep.
but not really relevant to the process we're entering into this year.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
All right,
Takes us to 3.2,
okay.
recap, review 2024, forecast assumptions.
All
So-
right.
Interesting, I do not have access to this one anymore, even on the added tab, so we'll have to talk to Deb about permissioning here. Can I look in on someone's, so I can remember this?
So, all right, so forecast assumptions, as we kind of talked about in the levy timeline. So the budget will be adopted on the 26th. When the forecast assumptions are approved, we basically take the budget. That'll be the basis for, or a base year for our forecast assumptions, so we're building off of that budget. So basically we enter the budget, build in all of these forecast assumptions with any other known information that we have, and then we'll use that to generate the 5-year forecast for the district. So then that'll come back to the October finance meeting and then the October RAM for the board. So the forecast assumptions we're looking at are kind of our big drivers of revenue and expenditures. We have PTEL. Obviously we know PTEL, that will impact the 26 fiscal years, the 3.4, which is the levy that is being worked on this year. As of right now, so the 2.7, that is just kind of where we are based on, kind of where we're forecasting to be based on through August CPI information. And then 2% is kind of what we've historically used, just as that is kind of the overall target for inflation. So those are kind of the numbers that we input there. New construction, you kind of see we've bounced a little bit, 40, 45, 40 kind of million range. So we had been at the 50 million, we kind of dialed that back kind of to 45, as the last few years we haven't seemed to come back up towards that 50 million mark. So we kind of I'd recommend just dialing that back a little bit. Replacement tax, so we kind of talked about this a number of times. As part of the budget this year, they're estimating the 1.7 million. I don't have specific information on whether we're back down to the bottom here, but I'm just reading from what information I do have access to, kind of forecasting that, this is kind of maybe the new base level, and then just kind of forecasting growth like on an inflationary basis throughout the next 5 years. Evidence-based funding, continuing basically flat with the nominal, I think it's 0.1% or something annual increase. All other state funding growing slightly faster rate, just because most of that is reimbursement. That's private facility tuition, that's special ed transportation are the biggest drivers there. We know those expenditures are growing at significantly faster rates in some of our other expenditures. But we know also that the state isn't increasing the funding at the same level as our expenditures are increasing, so I would expect those to grow, but grow a little bit more slowly than we're seeing on the expenditure side. Federal funding, basically some inflationary growth, but really fairly static. Investment income, I think, will be very interesting, and it really depends on, you know, the moves that the Fed makes. Obviously, you know, we're anticipating this year to have a decline from last year. We already saw, you know, a rate adjustment today, which will start impacting us, you know, now, and I guess maybe tomorrow, and then we'll you know, see how that kind of comes down, and where we kind of settle in at you know, a new stable, I guess, interest rate environment, and what that does to our investment income. So it's kind of total, that's the big revenue drivers. Any questions, thoughts?
If that corporate replacement happens to come in not as low as the 1.7, that just rolls back into the operating, right?
Yeah, so it would just be a surplus in the ed fund.
Ed fund, okay, gotcha.
All right, on the expenditure side, generally when we run the forecast model, we generally do we may run multiple versions depending on what potential things we see kind of in the near future. You know, in my time here, we've run different models based on, you know, the state redistributing, you know, pension costs and doing, you know, so we've run a bunch of different models on you know, for a variety of different factors. Typically in our base models, we don't project significant staffing changes. And I think even in the budget we've seen overall, while we've had nominal staffing adjustments year to year, for the most part, we don't really have significant changes in overall staffing levels for the district. You know, might be changes, a few employee groups here and there, but overall, we don't count in any large-scale staffing changes versus where we currently are budgeted at. Then for the other big impact on the salary side, obviously, the retirees for the teachers group, that is something that we're tracking. We have the actual information. We know that there's 13 individuals retiring at the end of this year. There's 18 individuals at the end of 26 and 7 at the end of 27. From there, we don't have the final 28 number. We'll have that. The individuals have until I think January 1st to submit. So we'll have a finalized number for 28 by January 1. 8 or 9 is kind of 8. It's like 8 and some changes, kind of the average that we've seen historically. 9 would be probably about where we would anticipate with the size of the employee group, and kind of just normally distributed throughout a 35-year career. I don't know if that is still good. That's kind of like the tier 1 model, but you know, we'll kind of using that, you know, for the years that we don't know, trending forward. For the employee groups where we have contractual information, as they're agreed to contractual increases, we're using that information in the forecast. Where we don't, we're falling back and using PTEL as the placeholder there for salary increases. Outside of salaries, we have insurance increases, which are really based kind of on historical data. We also have in the teachers' contract, which is obviously our largest group, we kind of have we have a cap at 4%. So we split costs up to 8%. We split them 50-50. Over that is the employee's responsibility. So we do have like kind of some of the upside protection on insurance costs that would be increasing greater than that. Transportation, you know, hopefully we're seeing, you know, a large increases the last 2 years. We've seen that kind of get back down into, you know, trend back down into like the long-term 3 to 4% range, into a like more manageable area. And then private facility tuition, you know, that was actually pretty good in '24, the actual numbers there. So this might, the budget for '25 might be a little conservative and the forecast might be a little conservative here. But there is obviously some variability year to year in that line item. And then the renovation capital replacement, this is you know, what we're projecting in dollars to allocate that portion of the budget to construction projects and replacement of IT capital equipment, department level capital equipment, and any district level capital equipment. So overall, that's the forecast assumptions. Any questions, concerns?
Just to walk through my memory, for fiscal year '22, which was school year '21-22, there was only 4 retirees, and I remember because there was less retirees, I think that Maginot line was around 7, 8, or 9 to pay for the steps and lanes.
Yeah, it's about 9. So
Yeah.
basically, I guess the theory of the salary schedule is the individuals coming off are funding the step and lane increases on the salary schedule. And then the district is responsible for any CPI increase to the schedule itself. That's the idea, I guess, behind it. But you have to have a set number of retirees. It varies. On average, it's about 9. It depends where people come off. Historically, it's people come off from the very bottom right corner as it's the people that have been here the longest and advance all the way down the salary schedule. It doesn't always happen. Some individuals are second career. Some people move from different spots, and then you hire in at a certain level. Generally, for us, that averages out to like NMA step 3. But in different years, it varies. If you're hiring more related service staff, you may have a greater education load. If you're targeting specific areas, so yes, in general, it's about 9 would fund. 9 individuals exit on the bottom right corner, and 9 individuals come in on MA3. Your staffing is flat, and then all of your step and lane increases are paid for by that change, and the district then is only absorbing the additional cost of the CPI increases.
So just for, comparative sake, if in this 24-5 school year, fiscal year '25, we have 13 retirees, that could otherwise create some budget favorability, if you will, but a lot of that was probably, for lack of a better word, absorbed by anomalous CPIs relative to 4 years ago and whatnot, right?
Yeah, so I think, historically, where we've had numbers lower, we've had to consume from other parts of the budget. And
Right.
generally, that's the capital side is
Right.
really the most flexible, is in that it doesn't have an apparent impact in that single year.
Right.
It has impacts down the road. So we don't want to, if you borrow from that, you need to repay it, or you put yourself in perpetuity underfunding your facilities.
Right.
And we know where that ends up. So,
Been through that.
yes, been there, done that, don't want to do it again.
Correct.
Yes, there is projected, you can see, in the years that we're gonna have, greater retirees, in the event that we have, additional funds, we're trying to funnel that back into and rebuild the investment on the capital side.
Right.
So you're saying, okay, we don't need to put the full CPI amount into funding the salary schedule and the salary increases. Some of that money then can return to capital projects, because that's where we pulled it out of in the years that we didn't have enough in
Right.
just revenue growth to
Right.
fund that. So it's just kind of that balancing act over a longer period of
Yeah.
time of knowing that it's not gonna be nice and neat, and it's not gonna be 9 individuals every single year, and it's just gonna line up perfectly. So you gotta kind of work over that extended period of time to, the budget has to be somewhat fluid, and understand that, borrow from this area, you need to repay back to it, or you set the district up to, to underfund their facilities on a long-term period. Any other forecast assumption questions? So this will come to the board for action next Thursday, and then we'll, after that, we'll move forward, starting to build out the forecast and bring it back for.
The only other question I would have on you is, and I assume this may be public facing, right?
Not this particular document, but it will be on Thursday. or like I said,
Or
Tuesday.
not public, other board members, I'm just focusing on
Yeah.
that 6.1% for school year 24-5. I'm assuming part of that is the initiation of part of the new teacher's contract, but also some of the CPI otherwise
Yes.
upticks, right?
Yeah, so you had a large CPI increase, and then you had, the 6 retirees from the year before was not enough to fund
Yep.
the schedule increases, so you had both those components together created a larger,
Gotcha.
a
And
larger
then-
increase.
And then it looks like it may be receding in years to come.
Well, yeah, obviously the year over year change when you have the 13, the 18, so you got these pretty low numbers, and then it kind of standardizes out after that into that 2 to 3% range.
Gotcha. Okay. Excellent.
Alright.
Move on to discussion item 3.3, fund transfer discussion.
So fund transfers, we kind of talked about the necessity for the fund transfer as part of the budget. Basically, in the end of last fiscal year, the transportation fund and the operations and maintenance fund ended with a negative fund balance. Just so we're clear, obviously we talked a little bit about how we defer early property taxes and stuff. The funds are not negative on a cash balance wise. There's cash in both those funds, there's cash to pay those bills. So it's not like if you ran out of cash, that's like overdrawing your checking account, that's bad. Fund balance is more of, you wanna be positive just because it looks better on, more form over substance, I guess, as I would say. But, so auditors didn't have concern with it, their question is, is your plan to address it, next year? The plan to address it is, we're looking at the budget as a whole, use the fund transfers to balance the funds, so we're targeting having positive fund balances in those 2 funds at the end of fiscal year 2025. So the fund that really has the surplus, the majority of our reserves is really the education fund. That's the fund that has most of the activity. We kind of have intentionally let the other, we don't really want to carry a large reserve balance in other funds. The ed fund gives us the most flexibility. It protects us from, if you accumulate funds in other areas to a certain extent, you can get hit with like excess cost litigation and other things which we've dealt with when I initially started here in our O&M fund, so we had intentionally been bringing down the O&M fund. Some of the issues I think we've had though during the pandemic is, and as we've gotten through that point in time, we've had a lot of favorability in certain budget years. Most of the time that happens in the ed fund where we've had, the increased interest rate revenue, we've had the increased replacement tax revenue. That benefited a lot of that benefited the ed fund, but then we've also simultaneously sometimes used that surplus on the whole to fund either additional construction projects, additional capital replacements. Some of those actual expenditures then were coming out of the O&M fund. Transportation, we know we had a significant increase in the rise of transportation and just grew a little bit quicker than we had allocated the levy for. So really we're kind of doing our best to project, like when we do the levy this fall, how do we distribute that money, for the following, for the next fiscal year? And if things move in that interim period between when you finalize the levy, you can end up with a mismatch of not quite enough revenue to cover those expenditures. So the fund transfer resolution, this will move about $1.75 million from ed fund to O&M and about $500,000 from ed to transportation fund. The fund transfer does require a public hearing, so this would need to be posted I think at least 7 days, but not more than 14 days before the meeting. So I just need direction on if it comes to the October Committee of the Whole or October RAM, so that we know when to run the newspaper publication for, and then we'll post it up on the website as required, and then this would come to the board for action, and we would do a hearing similar to kind of what we do for the budget hearing. You kind of suspend the meeting, go into the hearing, there's opportunity for public comment, close the hearing, and then the board has the ability to adopt this. I think the last time we did this was in like June of '22. I think we moved money.
2 years ago.
Yeah, so not that infrequent. historically done a lot of transfers between debt services and capital projects, where we've done resolutions for that, so that's it's not really atypical, but it happens periodically here and there.
When is the soonest we can do this?
It can go as early, for lead time, like lead time on the publication,
Yes.
we can run the advertisement and bring it on October 12th?
Is board meeting?
October 10th.
We have it on that Wednesday, I believe.
Yeah.
Because there's
Because,
parent teacher.
Yeah.
yeah, parent-teacher conference, I
Oh.
think it's 10th, right?
9th?
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 So-
It's that Wednesday.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the ninth.
Alright, so, I can do whatever the finance committee directs me to do, or is where it fits best under the agenda, it doesn't matter to me, it can go to either of them, and it's fine.
I mean, Kat, whatever you and Dr. Locke would see as the thinner meeting of the two, I would put it there.
We can't anticipate that right now. I would
Right.
suggest doing it as soon
Yeah, no, I would
as
agree.
feasible.
I just think it's important, and you touched on these things, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, the ed fund is the destination target for funds that are coming from the corporate replacement tax, to the extent it gets revised higher on final disbursement from the state. It's also, the benefactor of additional, otherwise non-budgeted interest revenue anticipated from higher rates and eventually lower rates, you know, to the opposite. But it's in that fund, and I just think it's important to explain to the public, it's in
Yeah.
that fund for a reason, because that fund offers the most flexibility once it's there versus other places relative
Right.
to what you've dealt with in the past. And, you know, just to walk people through some of the transportation challenges we've had
Mhm.
over the course of time in the O&M fund. I don't know for sure how much we have or haven't spent in a cadence like fashion these last few years, but I'm sure, I think of the roof and I think of the units up there, what are they called,
Air handling units?
well, what have we been trying to deal with for the boilers and this, and we go back and forth. My point is that O&M's a good place for it to wind up,
Mm-hmm.
but the reason it's getting transferred into that fund, it's important to, I think, walk people through,
Yeah.
because that flexibility it does offer. And I was just curious, part of that 175, other than those two, things we mentioned, is also part of the fact that we have a difficult time hiring some of the non-certified staff
Mhm.
relative to competitive forces, which
Yeah.
might generate that credit balance too, right?
That's a component of it, yeah.
Yeah, just to walk people through that as much as possible,
Mhm.
so they can get their head around it, but I would think the earliest the best.
Okay. Alright, I will work on that.
Excellent,
Thanks, Josh.
thank you. And that takes us to, unless there's any other questions, to 3.4, the procurement update.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch base, I know we talked with the committee, when we did the one-year renewal for transportation last year. There was, I think, interest in a longer-term, transportation contract. As part of the ability to achieve a longer transportation contract due to the change in legislation, we would be going out for a new RFP. This would be the regular and special education, bus transportation. So, my department we're working on updating those. Just wanted to touch base to see if there were any direction, I guess, from finance committee on, you know, are we looking, you know, to just do, you know, something on the shorter term side, like a 3-year contract? Are we looking to do, you know, something on the longer term side? Is there any interest in exploring, I think it's probably a little premature, the electric bus, as it would be like solely a cost on the district, and it would be a significant expense compared to, you know, regular buses at this point in time, without being in a position to be the beneficiary of federal or state funding. But it's something that if we wanted to explore it in this time, it could be explored. But I would assume that would come at a significant premium. So yeah, I was just wanted to get a feel if there was.
I think a few board members in here have EVs.
I've done the numbers on charging, even though it
Myself
tells me I'm
included.
saving money, I'm not. I've done the actual numbers per kilowatt charging off peak. It's not as great as it seems. And if the electric rates go up even further, it's gonna be a larger gap.
Well, how about the Tesla, what they call the Tesla supercharger graveyards in February, remember that?
That-
You know, like
Yeah.
all the superchargers, when it was wicked cold,
Right.
these things froze and cars couldn't charge and the people were in line, they couldn't get into the spot because she couldn't get out because she was dead. And not to mention it's expensive, I definitely wouldn't wanna go the EV route.
I think it's premature.
Totally.
I just
Not
wanted
yet.
just wanted to know up front. That's kind of where I was at too, but I just wanted to make sure and
Go
didn't
to
want to go
solar.
out and come back and be like, why didn't you look at this? So, because it'll be a, probably, 2 months or so from now. I just don't want to mess up, the timeline of this and make sure that the committee's getting information back that they're expecting.
And then Josh, as far as like a duration for a quote for an RFP, I would love to see a couple of them, maybe a 1 year and a 3 year. But, given the yield curve, seemingly pricing in 250 basis points in the next 18 months cut, and CPI retracing, I'd lean closer to what would be a more expensive 1 year, just, top of my head to what might turn into a much cheaper 1 or 2 year in a couple years as some of those forces start to retrace. But hopefully we can see both, like a 1 year and a 3 year or something.
Okay.
Can an RFP go out for both with different terms, or are those
Mhm.
two separate
Yeah,
RFPs?
they could submit one. We could ask for some multiple
Okay,
items.
fantastic.
So we need a cyber bus for the school.
Mhm.
What do they call it? What are the ones in San Francisco called the passenger list or the driver list?
Yeah, that they're using regularly, I
They
guess.
have those.
That would be more helpful to us because we're still struggling with drivers. So.
That I could get.
That would be
behind.
great for
We'll
the
save the
district.
labor. Make sure it's not cold out.
Self-driving buses.
I'm not sure if insurance would cover it, but
I don't think we
we'll
get
see-
any
we'll see about
liability
that.
coverage.
If that would increase ridership on our buses,
Yeah,
and
that could
thus
help.
decrease the parking and transportation needs at Central, now we're talking.
Right?
Mhm.
All right,
All right.
thanks.
If there is no further discussion, I move to adjourn the meeting of the September 18th Finance Committee.
Thank you.
The time is
5:30.
5:31 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.